There is a box in the back of many churches. Inside it are envelopes with the text printed 1,000 offering. The idea is simple, and it is sincere. You give 1,000 times, and when the last envelope is offered, God will open his hand. The reason people believe this is a single verse. One king, one hill, one night. The king is Solomon. The hill is called Gibeon, and the verse says he offered 1,000 burnt offerings there. Then God appeared to him in a dream and said, "Ask what I shall give you." 1,000 animals, and then everything a man could want. It looks like a receipt. It looks like proof. But read the passage slowly, and something strange happens. The 1,000 is never mentioned again. Not by God, not by Solomon, not by the narrator. Everyone in the story acts as if the number did not matter at all. So what was the 1,000 for? And can a man really make a decision in his sleep and have God answer it? Gibeon sits about 6 miles north of Jerusalem. The modern village on the site is called El Jib. For a long time, the identification was only a guess. Then, between 1956 and 1962, an American archaeologist named James Pritchard excavated there. Deep in a great rock-cut pool, his teams pulled out jar handles. Scratched into the clay were 3 Hebrew letters. G-B-N, Gibeon. The city had signed its own name onto its wine jars. A place from the Bible became a place on a map. So we know where Solomon went. The harder question is why he went there at all. Because Jerusalem already had something Gibeon did not. Jerusalem had the Ark of the Covenant. David had brought it into the city years before. We followed that journey in an earlier episode. But the Ark was sitting in a tent David had pitched for it. The older sanctuary was somewhere else. Chronicles tells us plainly, the tent of meeting from the days of Moses was at Gibeon. And the bronze altar was there, the one built in the wilderness. Israel's worship had split in 2, the Ark in one city, the altar in another. A kingdom with its holy things in different rooms. That is the situation Solomon inherited. Kings calls Gibeon the Great High Place. In Hebrew, a high place is a bama. It simply means an elevated worship platform, an open-air altar on a hill. Not a building, not a temple. Just a raised place under the sky. And here the narrator does something careful. Before he tells us anything about the 1,000, he says this: the people were sacrificing at high places, because no house had yet been built for the name of the Lord. Then he adds a small, sharp word about Solomon himself. Solomon loved the Lord. Only he sacrificed at high places. Only. That word is a warning light left on in the corner of the room. The story has barely begun, and we have already been told there is a problem with this hill. Now the number. The Hebrew word for the offering here is olah. It means what goes up, smoke rising. An olah is a whole burnt offering. Everything is consumed on the altar. The worshiper eats nothing, keeps nothing, takes nothing home. That matters, because Israel had other kinds of sacrifice. The shelamim, the fellowship offering, was a shared meal. You gave part to God, and you sat down and ate the rest with your family. The olah is the one where you get nothing back. It is total. And Solomon offered 1,000 of them. Try to picture the logistics. One altar, one fire, each animal butchered, arranged, and burned to ash. This is not an afternoon. This is days of smoke on a hilltop. It is also a staggering amount of money. 1,000 heads of livestock is not a personal gift. It is a national expenditure. This is the treasury of a kingdom, going up in smoke, which tells us what kind of act this was. Not private devotion, state ceremony. Kings in the ancient world announced themselves this way. Centuries later, in Assyria, King Ashur-nasir-pal II opened his new palace at Kalhu with a feast that lasted 10 days. His own inscription counts the guests, 69,574. Then it lists the animals, 1,000 cattle, 1,000 calves, 10,000 sheep. The stone was found in 1951. and it is still read today. Enormous round numbers carved in public at the beginning of a reign. That is the world Solomon is standing in. A new king spends impossibly, visibly at the start, so that everyone understands the scale of what is beginning. So the 1,000 is real, and it is also a statement. It says, "This reign begins with everything given away." That is worth admiring. But notice what it is not. It is not a formula. It is not a quota. And no ordinary Israelite could have done it. The text is describing a coronation, not a discipline. Here is where the whole question turns. The verse order looks like cause and effect. He offered 1,000. Then God appeared. But the story itself refuses that reading, 3 separate times. First, God does not arrive with a price already paid. God arrives with an open question. Ask what I shall give you. If the 1,000 had purchased something, there would be nothing to ask. The king would simply collect. Instead, God hands him a blank page. Second, look at how God explains his own gift. He does not say, "Because you have given this." He says, "Because you have asked this." The reason named in the text is the request, not the sacrifice. And God specifically praises what Solomon did not ask for. Not long life, not riches, not the death of his enemies. The whole speech is about the shape of Solomon's desire. The animals are not in it. Third, the prophets attack this idea directly. Micah imagines a man trying to work out the correct price for God's favor. "Thousands of rams," he says. 10,000 rivers of oil. Should I give my firstborn? He is bidding upward, desperately, the way people do. And the answer comes back, and it is not a bigger number. He has told you what is good. Do justice. Love mercy. Walk humbly with your God. Micah uses the very word, thousands, and he says no. Samuel had already said it to Saul. To obey is better than sacrifice. The psalm says it in the voice of a broken man. You do not delight in sacrifice, or I would give it. The Bible knows about the 1,000-envelope instinct. It is very old. Scholars call the ancient version of it a contract with heaven. I give, so that you will give. It was the operating logic of nearly every religion around Israel, and it is the one thing Israel's prophets never stopped attacking. Because the moment giving becomes a mechanism, God becomes a machine. And a machine is not someone you can love. Now the dream. Solomon sleeps at the sanctuary. That detail is not decoration. In the ancient Near East, it was a recognized practice. Scholars call it incubation. You travel to a holy place. You offer sacrifice. You lie down there deliberately, hoping the god will come to you in the night. The evidence for this is everywhere in the ancient world. In Egypt, a young prince fell asleep in the shadow of the great Sphinx. The god spoke to him and promised him the throne of Egypt. The promise came with a condition. Clear the sand away from my body. The prince became Pharaoh Thutmose IV. He carved the whole dream onto a slab of granite and set it between the Sphinx's paws, where it still stands. In Mesopotamia, a ruler named Gudea dreamed instructions for building a temple and built it. At Ugarit, on the Syrian coast, a weeping king named Kirta fell asleep, and the god El came to him with a promise of a son. So the form of Solomon's night is not unusual. A king, a sanctuary, sleep, a God who speaks. The French scholar Jean-Marie Husserl has mapped these dream reports across the ancient world, and Solomon's fits the pattern almost exactly. Almost. Because one thing in the Israelite version breaks the mold, and it breaks it completely. In Egypt, the god states his terms. Clear my sand, and I will give you a crown. The transaction is spoken out loud. At Gibeon, God states no terms at all. He asks a question. Ask what I shall give you. The pagan dream is a bargain. The Hebrew dream is an invitation. And there is one more difference: quieter and stranger. In every royal dream from the ancient world, the king already knows what he wants: a throne, an heir, a victory. Solomon is handed an unlimited offer and asks for something that mostly benefits other people. So can a human being make a real decision while asleep and have God respond to it? The text says yes, but it is very careful about how it says yes. Look at what Solomon actually asked for. Most translations say a discerning heart or an understanding mind. The Hebrew is lev shomea, a listening heart, a hearing heart. He did not ask to be clever. He asked to be able to hear, and before that, he described himself with two small words: Na'ar katon, a little child, the most powerful man in the region, calling himself a boy who does not know how to go out or come in. That is what came out of him when the guard was down. And that is the point. The dream did not create Solomon's character. It exposed it. Sleep only strips away the performance. What a man reaches for when he believes no one is watching is simply who he already is. The dream was not a lottery. It was a mirror. Then watch what the narrator does next, because it is deliberate. Solomon woke up, and behold, it was a dream. The story admits it. It does not hide behind the vision. And then Solomon does something. He travels to Jerusalem. He stands before the Ark of the Covenant. He offers sacrifices, and he makes a feast for his servants. A waking act confirms the sleeping request. And immediately after, the famous scene arrives. 2 women, 1 living child, a sword. The gift he asked for in the dark is tested in daylight, in public, in front of the whole kingdom. That is how the Bible validates a dream, not by the vividness of the dream, by what happens after the man wakes up. Scripture is honest that God can work in sleep. Job says God opens the ears of men in a vision of the night, but Scripture is equally firm about the danger. Deuteronomy says that if a dreamer gives you a sign, and the sign comes true, and he then leads you toward other gods, you do not follow him. Even a dream that works can be a lie. And Jeremiah is blunter still. Let the prophet who has a dream tell his dream, but let the one who has my word speak my word faithfully. What has straw in common with wheat? The word weighs dreams. Dreams never weigh the word. There is one more line at Gibeon, and it is almost always left out. After the promise of wisdom, riches, and honor, God adds a condition. If you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes, then I will lengthen your days. The wisdom was a gift. The long life was conditional. Even on the best night of Solomon's life, God attaches an if. And there is a detail the chronicler quietly changes when he retells this story. He describes the same night at Gibeon. He describes the same question and the same answer. But he never uses the word dream. He simply says, God appeared. Something about the word had grown uncomfortable. Perhaps because by then, everyone had learned how many false prophets came holding dreams. Now hold all of it together. The 1,000 offerings, the listening heart, the wisest ruling in Israel's history. And then ask the honest question, did it last? Because God appeared to this same king a second time. Twice. Which is more than almost anyone in Scripture receives. And the record tells us where Solomon ended. Not at Gibeon, on another hill. So what do we do with the box of envelopes? Not mock it. The impulse behind it is real, and it is often beautiful. People want to give God something that costs them. That instinct is not the error. The error is the arithmetic, because Solomon's 1,000 was a coronation, not a formula. Because God's stated reason was the asking, not the giving. Because Micah looked at thousands of rams and said, "This is not what he wants from you." And because of one final fact, which settles it. If 1,000 offerings could secure God's blessing, then Solomon's blessing would have held. It did not. The king who filled the sky over Gibeon with smoke, in the end, built altars on the hill east of Jerusalem. Altars for Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians. Altars for Chemosh, the god of Moab. The wisest man in the world, building high places for other gods, within sight of the temple he had built for the Lord. How does that happen? Not suddenly. Never suddenly. That is where we go next.